Hi, I'm Bert Nussbaumer from macrobeat.co.uk. We didn't have a big data week this week, but that didn't stop us from having a rather quite busy week in equities and in foreign exchange. Yesterday, we had the long-awaited ECB meeting that did actually throw some surprises our way. Mrs. Lagarde went for the option of glass half full, tried to paint a very optimistic picture of the economy. She wasn't too bothered about the euro strength, which was a bit of a surprise, but it just starts to seem as if central banks start to realize that if they continue to talk glass half empty, as Fed Powell has tried in some of his press conferences, that the impact is just one of a more negative nature. Whether the market truly believes what the ECB done and said yesterday, time will tell. Definitely we had a bit of a move, but that really brings us to the biggest story this week, which is obviously the UK story, the introduction of the internal market bill that has really thrown quite a curveball in this entire Brexit negotiation, sending shockwaves across the market as well, probably some bigger waves on the way to Brussels. The EU has given the UK an ultimatum until end of September to withdraw that bill. That basically would be a bill that tears up the withdrawal agreement signed by the UK government last week. So obviously there's a massive political element in there. But whatever it's going to be, it definitely created a very high tension towards the sort of later process of the trade negotiation with the EU. But I want to talk about that more on the slides I have for you. The first one I want to show today is the euro. As I said, we had the ECB meeting yesterday. The more upbeat message from Lagarde has sent the euro up to like 119.20. But there wasn't really much follow through at that stage. It just feels that the underlying story in the dollar is still the same. US data starts to outperform euro data again. Inflation expectations are more anchored in the US than they are in the eurozone. So I don't really see that the euro has to break above 120 anytime soon. On the next slide, we have sterling. That's the real story of the week. Sterling lost 5% in about 7 trading days. Especially the last few days have been rather very heavy, as I indicated, the political mess that we find ourselves in. Maybe a small amount of this move is a small reprice of the no-deal Brexit risk, but actually I think the majority of the move for the last 2 days has really more been about the political implication of that bill that Johnson introduced, rather than already pricing in a higher percentage of a no-deal risk. I just want to remind people, back in 2016, after the Brexit referendum, cable dropped about 18 big figures on that day. Of course, we can argue no one did really expect a Brexit yes vote, so there's a bit of that in there as well. But between that referendum night and October, we lost 30 big figures in cable. What I'm trying to say is, if we start to price in higher odds of a no-deal Brexit, I think cable definitely will start to weaken down to the 124 area, maybe even towards 120. A no-deal Brexit to me is still a big risk for cable, which ultimately will be a risk for the euro as well, and adds to the idea that we don't really need to go above 120. So sterling has to be watched. This is what currency crises are made of. I'm not saying we are right there yet, but we could potentially be there. So be careful on sterling. Don't fade these sort of sell-off. You could rather get more nasty next week. On the next slide, NASDAQ. I picked that one. I could have picked any of the sort of US indices. Very extreme volatility really here in the last few sessions. And the only thing I would say here is, usually in my eye, this is happening towards the end of a trend, so we might not yet be ready to roll over. Close below 11,102 in the NASDAQ, to me, would actually tell me that we have seen the highs. Last but not least, gold, very tricky spot, the triangle getting smaller and smaller, and I would think the gold has about 48 hours left to really put the performance on the top side. Otherwise, there's a bigger risk of another shakeout, could take us down to 1866, maybe even 1835. That's it from me for this week. Thank you very much indeed, and have a lovely weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.